hard to get everybody back. It's cold everywhere. I've been around. Everybody's complaining. Yes.
Okay.
That's fine, waiting for the meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you. Because you are the subject. Yes. In case that there was an accusation in the Metropolitan.
Brothers, at this time, we will hear preliminary presentations of amendable action items.
I want them to find their place.
Yeah,
So we'll talk. No, we'll
but at
break.
least it means I started. I can't do a bell sound. Oh. I'll do it again. At this point, brothers, we will hear preliminary presentations of amendable action items. Following the chairman's remarks, there will be an opportunity to ask questions of clarification only. Since we are not speaking in favor or against any of these, please use a yellow card to be recognized at this point. We will have the debate and the vote on the items tomorrow and Thursday. Amendments for action items 3, 4, and 5 are due at 5 o'clock today in the trays outside of this meeting room. As mentioned, the Bishop Accountability action items 6, 7, and 8 will be voted on Thursday, and thus these amendments are not due until 5 p.m. on Wednesday. Given that, I'd like to call forward Bishop Robert Dealey of the Canonical Affairs and Church Governance Chair to deal with action item number 6. Do the members approve the protocol regarding available non-penal restrictions on bishops? Bishop Dealey.
Thank you, Your Eminence. Brothers, during our plenary assembly last November, we agreed to take whatever steps are needed to assure the Catholic faithful of greater accountability for bishops. At this plenary assembly, we can now take clear and concrete steps to put our commitment into practice. Responding to requests for assistance from members of this Episcopal Conference, the Administrative Committee last September directed the Committee on Canonical Affairs and Church Governance to develop a resource which would offer practical guidance on the range of restrictive measures that can be imposed by a diocesan bishop on a former diocesan or auxiliary bishop present in the diocese. If the diocesan bishop has determined that such measures are for the good of souls or the unity of the local church. What you have before you then in action item number 6, protocol regarding available non-penal restrictions on bishops, responds to this request. Before I invite your questions for clarification, allow me to make 5 brief introductory points about the action item. First, the committee wishes to underscore the valuable service that bishops emeriti have given to our local churches. Woven throughout the protocol are important affirmations of the fraternal bond that naturally exists between the diocesan bishop and bishops emeriti, and the stated hope that any measures that are put into place are the result of mutual dialogue and a deference to authority. In developing the protocol, particular attention was given to the rights and obligations of all of those involved. Second, a foundational premise for the protocol is the understanding that the competent ecclesiastical authority for judging a bishop in penal cases, and therefore the competent authority to impose ecclesiastical penalties upon a bishop, is solely the Supreme Pontiff. Only the Holy Father can remove a bishop from office or impose other penalties on him, such as dismissal from the clerical state. Accordingly, what is articulated in this protocol are not penalties, canonically speaking. Rather, they are in the category of non-penal measures. The Holy See itself may even have imposed such measures on a bishop emeritus. It is in view of the competence of the Holy See over bishops that the protocol repeatedly encourages the diocesan bishop to communicate initially and regularly with the apostolic nuncio on the situation in his diocese and concerning the restrictive measures that he, as diocesan bishop, intends to apply to address it. Direct intervention by the Holy See may be needed if the desired restrictions are beyond the diocesan bishop's authority due to the particularities of the case or given the limits of a diocesan bishop's territorial jurisdiction. Third, the protocol intentionally addresses a particular set of circumstances, namely situations where a bishop resigned from or was removed from his office as a result of a grave act of commission or omission, as stipulated in the Code of Canon Law, the motu proprio sacramentorum sanctitatis tutela, the motu proprio as a loving mother, and the motu proprio vos estis lux mundi. In addition, it envisions cases where, subsequent to his resignation, a bishop emeritus was found by competent ecclesiastical authority to have so acted or failed to act. If this protocol is approved, the steps toward episcopal accountability the action item will put into place will aid in promoting the unity of the Church and the good of the faithful entrusted to a diocesan bishop's care. Fourth, this action item is best described as a summary or compilation of existing provisions of universal canon law. That is, it reflects provisions that are already at the disposal of a diocesan bishop in the ordinary exercise of his discretion, governance, authority. The canonical provisions have been brought together into a single document to be an assistance to diocesan bishops. In this sense, the protocol does not contain innovations to existing canon law, neither is it intended to be prescriptive in nature. Finally, at the conclusion of the document is a brief discussion of actions that can be taken by the president of this Episcopal Conference that would restrict the participation of such a bishop emeritus within the USCCB itself. So, brothers, this action item should already be familiar to you since we discussed it during our plenary assembly in November. In addition, each of you were given the opportunity to recommend modifications to the document following last November's plenary assembly. The protocol was reviewed by the Committee on Clergy, Consecrated Life, and Vocations, the Committee on the Protection of Children and Young People, the National Review Board, and the National Advisory Council. At your places this morning is a table reflecting modifications to action item number 6, since you received the document 3 weeks ago. Again, the committee is grateful for the modifications since they serve to strengthen our commitment to episcopal accountability. In addition, the committee welcomes any further amendments you would wish to make this week by the deadline which has been determined by the President. So with that, Your Eminence, I'm happy to answer any questions for clarification the members may have at this time.
Thank you, Bishop Dealey. Are there any members who would like to ask questions of clarification? Bishop Dealey's. Seeing none, Bishop Dealey, I think you have clearly presented the data. Thank you. We move now to clergy, consecrated life, and vocations. Cardinal Joseph Tobin. Do the members approve acknowledging our episcopal commitments? Cardinal Tobin.
Good morning.
Morning.
And I thank you, Your Eminence, for this moment to present the latest edition of a document that really began with a commission given to us by the Administration Commission last September. In November, we presented for your consideration a document entitled Standards of Accountability for Bishops. Since that time, the document has gone through further consultation that resulted in further revisions. Last month, as we already have acknowledged, we received from the Holy Father his motu proprio Vos Estis Lux Mundi. This important and timely document included many of the provisions that were in the standards document. As a result, the Committee on Clergy, Consecrated Life, and Vocations has revised again the standards document, resulting in a new version that you received a few weeks ago. We have considered the modifications you have offered, and at your place you'll find a chart of those that the committee has accepted, along with a revised version of the complete text with the modifications highlighted. Please note that, once again, we've changed the title of the document to Affirming Our Episcopal Commitments in response to a recommendation from the National Advisory Council. The CCLV committee is most grateful for the assistance of those who submitted modifications to the draft. We would ask that you take time to review the revised draft and submit any emendations you would like to the CCLV committee to consider. These emendations will need to be submitted by 5 p.m. tomorrow evening. At this time, Your Eminence, I'm willing to respond to any questions for clarification.
Thanks, Cardinal. Anyone for Cardinal Tobin about questions of, yes, Bishop McKnight, followed by Bishop Barber.
Thank you, Cardinal Tobin. I want to also express my appreciation to the staff of the conference and Bishop Deely, who helped with the webinars that we had to prepare us for our meeting today. I found it very helpful. My question pertains to number 2 on page 2, dealing with the language of pledging that the requirements of the Charter for the Protection of Children and Young People apply to bishops as well as priests and deacons. Well, as we know, in the Charter, there are moral commitments made to utilizing a review board. There's the requirement of letters of suitability. Has the committee considered those 2 requirements, and what's the understanding of the language in that section? Thank you.
Our understanding it was the expressed desire of the conference to include bishops in the requirements of the Charter. We needed to do it in a way that didn't require a change in the essential norms. And so what we're expressing collectively is a pledge to hold ourselves and our fellow, one another, to comply fully with the charter of the charter statement of Episcopal commitment. So I think that our understanding is that we can't immediately change the essential norms. We can propose changes, but we have the possibility of taking, mutas mutandis, what is said in the charter and live by it ourselves. Hope that helps, Bishop Sean.
Bishop Barber?
Your Eminence, I have a question.
Can't. Microphone. Can't
Hello.
hear.
There we are. I agree that the Charter should apply to bishops as well as priests. According to the Charter, if there is an accusation against a priest, the priest must step aside from pastoral office and public celebration of the Eucharist pending the completion of an investigation by the Diocesan Review Board. If a bishop is accused, does he have to step aside from the governance of his diocese and public celebration of the Eucharist pending the completion of the investigation into him by the Metropolitan? And if so, who administers his diocese while he has stepped aside?
I think those are excellent questions, but not for this document. Those belong more appropriately with the implementation of the motu proprio.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sir? Bishop Soto.
I want to thank the work of the committee on this, and I have a question and about in various points throughout the document. It speaks about the abuse of minors, and then it also talks about the misconduct with adults. And and oftentimes they're also put into the same point. And while I know that this body, that we are committed to try to deal with that, I wonder if did the committee give any consideration as to whether or not the matter of misconduct with adults should be identified and discussed in separate points, as to always, instead of always putting them in the same, let's say, category as abuse of minors, and I just raise it as a whether that the committee gave any consideration to that.
Certainly, the committee considered suggestions from the body of bishops that a whole wide range of conducts would be involved. We basically, after Vos Estis Lux Mundi, decided to be most concrete with the behaviors that are listed there in that document. And the body of bishops is free, and certainly you are, Your Excellency, to suggest an amendment where you'd like to see, either the separation of the sexual abuse of children and vulnerable persons from the wider category of sexual misconduct.
Is there anyone else? I don't see anyone else. Bishop McKnight, followed by Bishop Kikanis.
Thank you once again. Just to clarify, my understanding is the affirmation of our Episcopal commitment has to do with our pledge. It's a moral commitment, right?
It is.
The essential norms have to do with the law, and that's what the next document's going to address, the implementation of Vos Estis. So my concern is this, not a concern, but what I'm trying to get clarity on is if we pledge to hold ourselves to the requirements of the moral commitment in the Charter, what does that mean specifically when you get to the details of the requirement of the use of the laity in terms of a review board, and the details of requiring letters of suitability? How does a bishop issue a letter of suitability on himself? That's the question I have. Thank you.
I personally as a bishop, I have submitted letters of suitability, but they were never signed by me. I think that the use of lay in the process envisioned by Vos Estis Mundi, Lux Mundi, is clear, and I think although it sounds like it's facultative in the document itself, once again, and there was an acknowledgement already today, this was a document that had to be flexible enough to be written for the whole world. We have the opportunity, and we will avail ourselves of it, to fashion it in order to implement it the best way we can in the National Church of the United States. The requirements that you're talking about, I think, once again, will be more applicable in our implementation of that document. What we tried to avoid in this that wasn't in the earlier editions was mixing genre between the moral and the ascetical, together with quasi-legal norms. We thought it was confusing the document, and it certainly would have confused people not only here in the United States, but also in the Holy See. So we tried to keep this as a moral, ourselves recognizing the moral responsibility we have. And I think that it would be, in my own mind, a unconscious bow to legalism if we saw the normative as being more important than the moral, or the legal being more important than the moral. I think the moral, obviously, our salvation depends on how we respond to the call of Jesus to holiness.
Bishop Kikanis?
Your Eminence, just a simple question. Throughout the document, we refer to sexual abuse of minors or other vulnerable persons, sexual misconduct, and the mishandling of such cases by bishops. But in number 3, it limits it to the sexual abuse of a minor or other vulnerable persons by a bishop or other cleric. Is there some reason that the other phrases are dropped?
I think I need a lifeline here. Number 3. I mean, certainly, Bishop, the possession or distribution of child pornography isn't there either, and that's one of the... There's no reason why that phrase doesn't appear. If you think it should appear, please.
I mean, that third-party reporting mechanism would include those other items, I think, as well, right?
Yeah, and that'll
That's
be
my
considered
understanding.
later in this meeting. Thank you, Bishop.
Are there any other questions? Clarification points? Cardinal Supich.
Thank you, Your Eminence, and to your committee for the fine work that you've done. Given the discussion we've had about the pledge to observe the charter, I just wonder, would the committee think about having a sentence that would add, unless otherwise specified by the directive document? Because I think if if two are going to clash with each other, we should probably say that in that number, I think number 2 there. In order to avoid the conflict that's been raised by the other questions. So I don't know if that's an amendment that would be acceptable, or I'm not going to make it if that's not going to be helpful, but it just seems to me, since we're dealing with 2 documents here, and if we're pledging to the requirements of the charter without specifying that some other aspects of the accountability of bishops is going to be covered by the directives, we're probably going to get into trouble here.
We'll consider that, Cardinal. Thank you.
Okay, so you want me to submit that then? Or do you just...
If you want, I wrote it down. So,
Okay, fine.
And I'll know who to blame.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Archbishop Cordeleone.
Thank you, Your Eminence. I just wanted to follow up on the question about the charter applying to bishops and the mind of the committee. Is it basically that the principles of the charter that are contained within the charter apply to bishops? Again, mutatis mutandis, that those things that would properly apply to bishops. Is it the principles contained or the actual every requirement within the charter? Because I think that would also determine how we present our commitment.
Yeah, and I think that that's a correct understanding of the mind of the committee, and it's helped with the qualifier that Cardinal Supich just offered.
There's no one else that I see right now. Okay. Thank you, Cardinal Tobin.
You're
for
welcome,
the
Cardinal.
presentation. We move now to the Canonical Affairs and Church Governance again. Bishop Deely, with action item number 8. Do the members approve the directives for the implementation of the provisions of Vos Estis Lux Mundi concerning bishops and their equivalents? Bishop Deely.
Thank you, Your Eminence. Brothers, as you know, last month, our Holy Father Pope Francis promulgated universal law for the Catholic Church that establishes clear and effective procedures for reporting and investigating alleged conduct pertaining to sexual abuse by those who assume ministries in the Church, profess the evangelical counsels, or are called to serve the Christian people. That apostolic letter, motu proprio, Vos Estis Lux Mundi, took concrete steps toward the eradication of the crimes of sexual abuse by furthering the Holy Father's desire to accompany, protect, and treat victims of those heinous acts, respect the rights of defense and the presumption of innocence of those who are accused, facilitate the participation of lay experts in investigative and other processes, and implement for the Church throughout the world shared procedures for the adjudication of complaints. When Vos Estis Lux Mundi was promulgated, most of us, I think, saw within it long-standing practices observed in the United States, primarily as a result of our Charter for the Protection of Children and Young People and our essential norms. Before I address particularities of the modified action item, I want to say a bit more about the Holy Father's apostolic letter because it is essential for providing proper context for the directives, so please bear with me. As I mentioned, the apostolic letter establishes universal law for the Catholic Church. This is important for two reasons. First, nothing we propose from the United States can derogate from the universal law, contradict it, or eliminate options the Holy Father provides through his legislation. Second, the directives we are putting forth in no way replace the original law. Rather, these directives are to be read in constant reference to the apostolic letter, side by side, if you will. It is for this reason that the committee saw no need to repeat in the directives what is stated by the Holy Father in his apostolic letter. I would also want to be clear that whereas the apostolic letter addresses misconduct perpetrated by various individuals in the Church, the directives before you are limited to accusations against bishops. Our dioceses and eparchies already have established means for receiving reports related to misconduct by other church leaders. And this is also how we understand the mandate that we receive from the President. For many reasons, it is fair to say that the universal law is already nearly complete for establishing the processes that are to be followed for investigating complaints against bishops. In his apostolic letter, however, the Holy Father has generously provided a few areas where Episcopal conferences, such as the USCCB, can offer further instructions or the like to assist local provinces with their implementation of the universal law within their territories. The three areas outlined in the universal law offering latitude for local adaptations are as follows. 1, the apostolic letter permits the Episcopal Conference to make provisions related to the establishment of what it describes as, quote, public, stable, and easily accessible, close quote, systems for reporting complaints. This aspect of our steps as a conference will be discussed in more detail this week in a separate action item, but placeholder language is reflected in this action item number 8. Second, an Episcopal conference can issue directives to assist provinces in their development of lists of qualified persons, particularly from among the laity, who can cooperate with the Metropolitan in an investigation. And finally, latitude is given for an Episcopal conference to develop a fund to cover the costs of investigations. So practically, at your places, you should find a table containing modifications to action item number 8. The Committee on Canonical Affairs and Church Governance is most grateful for the modifications it received. They bear witness to the strong record of collaboration observed within the Episcopal Conference, including with the National Advisory Council and the National Review Board. With the table of accepted modifications, you should also find at your place a new text of the action item that integrates the modifications that were accepted by the committee. And I'm really grateful to the staff of the conference for the hard work they did in making it possible, because we met yesterday and this was done last night. The modified language is indicated in bold font. Please use the new clean text as the basis for submitting any amendments in the document. As you familiarize yourself with the new modified text, I wish to underscore the following. The proposed directives allow for robust participation by the laity, which builds upon the experience in this country when responding to allegations against priests and deacons. At the same time, it takes further steps in our commitment toward greater Episcopal accountability. Laypersons would be among the first receivers of a report pertaining to a bishop, in addition to the Metropolitan and the Apostolic See. They will assist the Metropolitan with the investigation of reports, and they are to assist the Metropolitan in his assessment of reports and the findings of investigations. The modified document enhances the provisions pertaining to conflicts of interest, and it expressly provides for collaboration among provinces to benefit from shared expertise, particularly for the smaller provinces in this country. Finally, brothers, I would note that these directives are designed to be provisional for a 3-year period. You might ask, we've done an awful lot of work. Why is that? On the one hand, the apostolic letter that these directives supplement was promulgated for a 3-year period. In addition, a review will give the provinces the opportunity to capitalize on any helpful findings or practices resulting from the implementation of the universal law. As I noted, these are important first steps. Again, the committee welcomes any amendments you would wish to make by the deadline determined by the President, which I believe is 5 p.m. Wednesday, tomorrow afternoon. And please use the page and line numbers on the new modified document for those amendments. So with that, Your Eminence, I'm happy to answer any questions for clarification that the members may have at this time.
Are there any of the brothers who have questions for clarification? Cardinal Supich?
Thank you, Bishop Deely and your committee. It really has been a wonderful contribution you've made to us, and I know you accepted a lot of emendations and modifications already. My question has to do with the fact that the motu proprio in the section dealing with reporting allows for the institution of ecclesiastical offices, of ecclesiastical office, in order to assist the Metropolitan. Most of us already have offices that receive the reports, that help us gather more information, that make a judgment of whether or not they're credible for moving forward. They also reach out to victims, and they also provide other services about how the public will be informed to make reports. So it seems that the motu proprio does allow for the establishment or the institution of an ecclesiastical office from the get-go that can be staffed by lay people to allow the bishop the help that he needs. So why is it that that was not considered by the committee as you put this together? Because we've heard a lot of talk about lay involvement being part of the very beginning of a process here. That provision allows for it and institutionalizes it. So that would be my question of why didn't you consider that?
Well, I think, first of all, in the document, it refers to ecclesiastical office. It doesn't refer to a bureau in a chancery. It doesn't refer to an office that we might have in a chancery. The ecclesiastical office is a canonical figure, such as the pastor or the vicar general or the bishop in a diocese. It doesn't refer to an office. And I think what we did was there are a number of possibilities, and if I recall the wording correctly in Vos Estis itself, it says including an ecclesiastical office.
It says even
an ecclesiastical office. So it offers a couple of possibilities, and it was not our wish to limit the possibilities that a metropolitan has to use whatever things he has. And I think the wording reflects that. It says that he should receive it along with there's a requirement that, or there's a suggestion that he designate a layperson to receive it at the same time as him. So how he does that is up to him. We're not restricting what Vos Estis does in that sense. If we specify to an ecclesiastical office, we're limiting what the document gives to the metropolitan to do.
Right, but I do think that by using that phrase, we institutionalize lay involvement from the very beginning. And that's an important message to send, especially from what we've heard here.
Generally though, ecclesiastical office, there's always that discussion in canon law and, who can have an ecclesiastical office and all the rest of that. But generally, when you think of ecclesiastical office, you think of clerics.
Not necessarily.
It's not the bureau that we have. It's not an office that we have in Chancery. It's a different thing. But if you if you want to make,
Okay,
I mean, look at the wording that we have put in here, which I think gives latitude for the Metropolitan to establish it as an office if he wishes to.
My only point,
But I'm not going to impose that on.
my only point, Bishop, is that if we standardize this as a norm by which, in fact, the Metropolitan is going to have a set office comprised with lay people leadership, we institutionalize that lay involvement, which otherwise we wouldn't have. That would be my only point. So I'll make the amendment, and then we can talk about it on
Okay,
Thursday.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bishop Biegler, followed by Bishop McKnight, and somebody else. Bishop Soto. Bishop.
Thank you, Cardinal DiNardo. In the revised text, I have a question for lines 117 and 118. In Vos Estis, it mentions that the Metropolitan is to transmit the acts together with his votum, and here he's only instructed to transmit his votum, and I'm wondering why there was the elimination of the word that he would transmit the acts together with the votum.
If that is in Vos Estis, then I would suggest that you make that a suggested amendment, and we will look at it.
In addition to that, the very next line, well, following on line 118, the very next sentence, he may also transmit the report to the investigator. Is there a problem with making that more direct, saying he is to submit the report?
The document, the Vos Estis, asks for the votum of the Metropolitan. It doesn't specify that anything else be there, and we were just trying to be faithful to the document.
Okay. Thank you.
Bishop McKnight, followed by Bishop Soto.
Thank you very much. So I'm looking at page, well, I guess we don't have a page number in the revised text. Line number 90.
Your
And assessing
number,
the
what
results.
is it?
Line number 90, 90. Am I looking at the right text? The revised text that was on at our places? And it says, that what's been added is, and assessing the results of that investigation. So I see a broadening of the use of lay experts. Is that correct? Not only in the investigation, but helping the Metropolitan to assess the facts that are reported?
I think that that's fair. I think it is, because it doesn't specify that it is just to review anything or anything like that. It says to use qualified persons as you wish, so we make that suggestion that he may utilize when conducting the investigation himself or through others, and assessing the results of that investigation, because the investigation generally in our diocese is done by a particular person and shared with others, and that discussion, but that gives him more latitude to use that.
Very good, thank you.
Soto and Barber.
Bishop Soto, followed by Bishop Barber.
Thanks again for the work of the committee. I have two questions. One, referring to Dr. Cesario's presentation, he raised, I think, the good question with regards to this document about an audit, and whether or not something like this there should be language that would, have some kind of an auditing mechanism by which we, bring an increased level of transparency and accountability for how we do this, and also given the fact that that we commit to reviewing these, was it after 3 years, that whether or not to stipulate that there'd be some kind of independent audit done on how this work is is carried out, would that be something worth, did the committee look at that, or is that something worth considering or ruling out? The second question also goes back to the presentation by the NAC regarding the fiscal or liabilities that might result from these. I know that that's come up before, and it came up during the NAC presentation, and whether there's, if this is, since we're doing kind of clarifications, whether there'd be worthwhile some discussion as to what new liabilities we may be creating for metropolitans and perhaps even for suffragans.
Thank you, Bishop. To the first question, which was, what was the first question? Oh, the audit. The audit is being handled by a separate committee. I know I have a meeting on Thursday night to talk about the audit, so there's no, we haven't, the enhanced, whatever's going to happen there is another question. It isn't, and it's not included in Vos Estis. So at this point in time, that isn't part of the discussion, but we'll see what happens with that other group. And in terms of the audit, my own feeling is that the audit has been very successful in keeping us accountable for what we're doing. I have both when I was in Boston and also now in Portland, have an annual on-site visit. They visit parishes, they visit schools, it gives everybody an opportunity to make sure that their processes are in place and all the rest of it. I personally have considered the audit to be very successful for us. And the other question to the the liability. That's a question but to me, we have a document that we have to, that the Holy See has told us that we are to use the Metropolitan. So we prepare the document, and then we ask the civil attorneys to argue with the insurance companies as to how we are going to implement that. I mean, that's really, we've done the best we can to take care of the liability in it. If Anthony wants to speak to that, we can have him do that. But that's not my concern as a canon lawyer. We try to incorporate the language that's suggested to us, but we have to do what we have to do as church to do the things we need to do.
Bishop Barber, followed by Bishop Tyson.
Hello, Bishop Deely. I'd like to ask my question again. If a bishop is under investigation, does he have to step aside from governance of his diocese?
I think a bishop, in the end, a bishop is different in the theology of the church, and we go to the part of the document which speaks to that in terms of says. At the conclusion of the investigation, the Metropolitan is to transmit the competent dicastery of the Apostolic See. He may also wait a minute, that's the wrong. There is a place in here. Lifeline. The apostolic letter addresses it in Article 15, says the facts, should the facts or circumstances require it, the Metropolitan shall propose to the competent dicastery the adoption of provisions or appropriate precautionary measures with regard to the person under investigation. So it's the Holy See which is going to have to put those restrictions on somebody once the Metropolitan says there's something here that needs to be addressed. And given, remember, this is a very timely thing that they've asked for. So, and I think that the Metropolitan can also be in touch with the nuncio and say, I think we need to do this sooner rather than later, if need be.
Okay, thank you very much.
Bishop Tyson, followed by Bishop Kikanis.
Well, first, thank you for all of the hard work and the detail and study that has gone into this. So just first a word of appreciation. My question's two parts. First, the motu proprio makes reference not only to the Metropolitan, but in the case of an allegation against the Metropolitan, the senior suffragan, I don't see a reference to the senior suffragan in this document. And my second question is related to this, and perhaps this is not a well-aimed question. I'm wondering to what degree existing diocesan lay advisory boards tied to the Dallas Charter and its essential norms that already exist in our diocese might form the core of experts, and then maybe others could be added either by the Metropolitan or the senior suffragan, depending on the case. And just wonder what the discussion was on that topic. Because I think the big concern is...
What is the question about the senior suffragan?
Well, again, going back to the first question, the motu proprio refers to senior suffragan in the case of an allegation.
In case the accusation is against the Metropolitan.
But this document in front of us doesn't have that reference. So I'm just wondering about
I think isn't that in footnote
Maybe
1?
I missed it. Well, that's just a first question, and then that's...
And the second question...
And the second question is the use of our existing diocesan lay advisory boards tied to the Dallas Charter and essential norms. Couldn't that be a core of the experts that we would be using, either the Metropolitan or...
To your first question, we put it in footnote 2 because we had to deal with a couple of different things there.
I see, it's in the footnote.
So the suffragan is in there. And to your other question, concerning review boards, I think the expertise of those groups can be used. The Metropolitan might choose to use some of the people from the review board. The thing is that the review board, in my mind, has a unique function in terms of the sexual abuse of minors. It's constructed in such a way to deal with that as an issue. And we want to be careful that we don't conflate the two realities, that we make sure that sexual misconduct and all that's connected with it is not put in the same bucket as sexual abuse of minors, because they're distinct realities and distinct crimes. And so the review board has its particular function to play. The expertise of individuals on that review board certainly can be used by the Metropolitan in concert with the other qualified laypersons that he would have in the province from other dioceses. So I don't see any problem with that.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bishop Kikanis, followed by Bishop McElroy.
Thanks, Bishop Deely. Excuse me. When is the accused to be informed according to Vos Estis or the directive?
I think it's an interesting thing there. He would be informed. It gives some specification concerning when that would be. I think that just as we do with in the same way we do with clergy misconduct, obviously he may be interviewed in the process, he may be informed, or there is the possibility of manifestly false, as the document says, in which case you may not have any need to notify him at all.
So it's not clear.
I think it would be done in the same way that we do the investigations in other matters.
My second question is with regard to the Metropolitan consulting with the Holy See. Can he do any kind of investigation prior to getting approval from the Holy See when he receives an allegation?
No.
So he has to first...
Because we have to leave because the Holy See might decide that Metropolitan is not the person to do it, that it should be done by somebody else for whatever reason that they come up with. And the more when we're talking about rights and responsibilities, I think that the protection of rights means that we don't disseminate the information until we know that we are responsible for doing the
So
investigation.
the Metropolitan writes to the nuncio, who then writes to Rome. Is that how the process is supposed to work? Or the Metropolitan writes directly to whom?
I think he can write to both, and I don't think we write. I think that's what we have, faxes, and, well, fax is kind of
Right.
gone now, but I mean, we
So
have,
he shouldn't do any preliminary investigation
yeah.
prior to...
No, he shouldn't do it.
The third question is, does any of this have prescription or statutes of limitations in terms of allegations that will be brought forward to the Metropolitan, either with regard to...
Well, if it's prescribed, then before, I think it still should be reported because it's a crime, or if it's a crime, or whatever it is, it should be reported. And then it's up to the Apostolic See, to the Holy See, and the particular dicastery to determine whether or not they're going to dispense from prescription in that matter. And if they give you permission to do an investigation, if they give the Metropolitan permission to do an investigation, then they have, in fact, dispensed from prescription.
So like, for example, if a bishop is being accused that he didn't handle the situation well, is there prescription related to that?
I don't know that there's prescription on that because I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the particular. That's in the canons on office and and not conducting office correctly and all the rest of that. I don't know I don't know that there is prescription on those.
Bishop McElroy?
I just wanted to return for a moment to Bishop Bigler's question about the acts and specifically the report. I think a number of us are looking for ways to insert into the plan more robust lay involvement. I think that's where Cardinal Supich was coming from on his office's question. But on this question of acts, it seems to me, do we not have the ability to put in there a provision that says that the Metropolitan or the suffragette, in whatever case, will send to the Holy See the report of the investigator, and do we not have the ability to say it needs to be a lay investigator? So that's my question. With those, I know you said in response to Bishop Bigler that you wanted to fall within the spirit of the motu proprio. But again, if synodality means anything, does it not give us the ability to specify certain things like this that will at least provide there's a lay voice that goes to the Holy See, not with overall judgment, but with the investigation?
I think that the document itself gives latitude to the Metropolitan to determine how he's going to do the investigation, and that's why we've used the language that we've used. Now, we have said that he should use lay people, and if there's an amendment that is consistent with the principles within which we have done this in fidelity to what the Holy Father has given us, that could be made. We'll look
You
at
could
it.
say must then.
No, we can't say must.
So we cannot even have an exhortatory provision in the...
Must is not hortatory. Must is a command. Must is prescriptive.
Well,
Should is hortatory.
or must is a standard. But anyway, I think that answers the question. Thank you.
Cardinal O'Malley, followed by Archbishop Broglio.
I just wonder if, in light of the fact that the motu proprio has us submit an accusation, and then you could wait up to a month before you would receive permission to either inform the person or conduct the investigation. And I understand that the document is made for the entire world, but by our standards here in the States, waiting a month before you could begin an investigation or even inform the person is a far cry from the usual practice and could be seen as leaving a situation that would endanger young people. I wonder if we need to urge the Holy See to to respond rapidly, even in less than 30 days, so that an investigation could be begun.
Thank you, Your Eminence.
Archbishop Broglio.
I probably should have raised this in administrative, but looking at the footnote number 2 to line 24, I am not a member of a province, nor do I have a senior suffragan. So what happens to an allegation against the Archbishop for Military Services?
We can move the immigration item to this afternoon with faithful citizenship. We'll buy from
Good question. I think that it's similar to, in a certain sense, it's similar to Bishop Lopes was telling me this morning. He has neither a metropolitan nor a senior suffragan. He reports directly to the Holy See. So I think that it would be whoever gets the allegation would bring it to the Holy See. There are always going to be anomalous things. We can't have a perfect world.
Is there anyone else?
Archbishop Wensky.
Oh, Archbishop Wensky is it.
Apropos to what Cardinal Sean O'Malley said, I understand there could be a delay for Rome to respond about it, giving permission for it, Metropolitan to initiate a investigation. But if this is something that's criminal and is brought to the Metropolitan or to a bishop, isn't the first response to the victim or the alleged victim is to tell them, this is a crime, call the authorities, and encourage them to call the authorities. The authorities would take care of that person civilly, and then that gives the Metropolitan the time to inform the Holy See if the Holy See wants him to conduct another investigation.
So what you're saying is inform the civil authorities.
Well, I think we're supposed to report crime.
We are supposed to report crime.
So if this is a crime, rather than if the allegation being brought to us is a civil crime or a felony, or why are we going to delay reporting to the authorities a crime? We should tell the victim, the alleged victim, you have a crime here, call the cops. And then, and hopefully the victim does that, and the police action will take its course, and then there is a role perhaps for the Metropolitan to begin the investigation. The cops might respond and decide there's not enough evidence, or they might not continue the thing, but but anyway, we would have the time to do that. So I think we have to be clear here, because I think where we got into trouble before is that before reporting crimes, we wanted to take it upon ourselves to determine whether there was any crime to report. And that's not what we should be doing.
I don't think that's what the document says. I think the document says that he should follow the law in terms of reporting crimes.
Brothers, we have Bishop Soto.
Just wanted to point out that Bishop Daly rightly pointed out the importance of not conflating the abuse of minors with misconduct with adults. And I guess my concern is that in the previous action item 7, that some of the language can be perceived as conflating those issues. And so that's, in some sense, I agree with the distinction that's being made in action item 8, but I'm worried that that's not consistent with some of the language that's being used in action item 7. So.
That's all, okay. All righty, no more clarifications. Of course, right now, that's all we are asking for. Bishop Ely, I think we've reached a point of clarification there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, Remember, these items have till tomorrow night, isn't it, Wednesday, for any amendments you want. Now we want to move to clergy, consecrated life, and vocations. Cardinal Tobin is returning, but this time, do the members approve the National Directory for the Formation, Ministry, and Life of Permanent Deacons in the United States, the second edition, for use in the Diocese of the United States? You know, this will be a vote that will require subsequent recognition by the Holy See. Cardinal Tobin. Cardinal Tobin. Is he here?
He's over here.
Is he coming?
Thank you, Your Eminence. Brothers, you may recall that the recognition, or the approval for the current National Directory for the Formation, Ministry, and Life of Permanent Deacons in the United States is set to expire at the end of this year. Given the pressing issues last November, we were unable to present the revised and updated version of the National Directory at that time. The second edition of the National Directory is the result of an extensive revision process which began with initial consultation of the body of bishops during the regional meetings of 2013 and has had the benefit of input from the National Association of Diaconal Directors, as well as consultation with the committees on doctrine, divine worship, canonical affairs, and church governance, and child and youth protection. The CCLV committee is most grateful for the assistance of those who recently submitted modifications to the draft. We would ask that you take time to review the revised draft and the accepted modifications chart which you have at your places, and submit any emendations that you would like to the CCLV committee to consider. These emendations will need to be submitted by 5 o'clock tonight so that we can proceed to work through the evening. At this time, Your Eminence, I'm willing to respond to any questions for clarification.
Any brothers who have questions for clarification for the permanent diaconate? Bishop DiMarzio, followed by Bishop Stowe.
It's an issue that probably is not sufficiently covered. It's on page 89, and it's the idea of the service of a deacon from another diocesan church. It looks like it envisions people going on a vacation, but the real problem is people who are moving to another diocese. Mm-hmm. Clearly, the diocesan bishop does not have to accept them, but it does say there that he must give them the exercise of their order. We're going to have to deal with that because there are many places, and New York is one, people move all the time to other dioceses. Many bishops do accept them, but then what happens if they do not accept them? Are they given faculties at least to assist at Mass or perform a baptism? It's really a bigger problem than just this. It can't be covered by that small paragraph. So that needs to be looked at, I think, a little more carefully.
On page 89, Your Excellency.
Yeah, page 89, lines, I'll put something in so you have it. It's 1310, around there.
We'll welcome your proposal. Thank you.
Bishop Stowe.
Cardinal Tobin, I notice every time in the document when there was a reference to the deacon as a minister of charity and justice, the reference to justice is now struck, and that is consistent throughout the document now. Was there a reason for that being a consistent pattern?
As I recall, it was an objection from the Committee on Doctrine, and I'm going to guess the staff remembers exactly what consisted in that objection. Let me check. Yeah, I'm told that the reason was to be consistent in the document with a threefold office of deacons, which is word, charity, and sacrament? And sacrament. The notion was that justice was subsumed in charity.
Is there anyone else on this document? No further questions of clarification? Okay, Cardinal Tobin, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. That's great. And now we move from there to the Committee on Divine Worship. Archbishop Gregory, if you would come forward. Do the Latin Church members of the USCCB approve the ISO Grey Book translation of the ordination of a bishop, of priests, and of deacons for use in the dioceses of the United States of America? This will eventually require 2/3 Latin Church members voting and confirmatio by the Congregation for Divine Worship and Discipline of the Sacraments. Okay, Cardinal.
Thank you, Your Eminence. Brother Bishops, the Bishops' Committee on Divine Worship has one action item for vote tomorrow: a new translation of the rites for the ordination of a bishop, of priests, and of deacons. Your meeting documentation includes an overview of the history of the English editions of the post-conciliar rites of ordination. Most recently, the USCCB approved a translation of the book in 2002, and the Holy See published a slightly updated version of it in a pontifical in 2012. The various English-speaking conferences around the world have taken different approaches to this text. Some still use the ISO translation published back in 1978. Some adopted the same edition that we approved in 2002, and others used the Holy See's book of 2012. For this reason, the Holy See encouraged ISO to prepare a new, up-to-date translation, with the hope that it might lead to a more unified approach to the rites of ordination. All the English-speaking bishops' conferences around the world have had the opportunity to participate in the preparation of the text that you have before you. I should note that our neighbors in Canada approved this text last year, and the Holy See has already granted its confirmatio to their book. While there have been no changes in the Latin typical edition, and while this new translation does not differ significantly from the current U.S. text, the Committee on Divine Worship is of the mind that several factors support the approval of this new translation. First, both the 2002 and 2012 editions are currently out of print. Two, the new translation is updated with respect to the Roman Missal and the ceremonial of bishops. Three, the committee is pleased with the quality of ISO's new translation work. And four, the committee supports the Holy See's desire for a more unified worldwide translation. The only modification of the typical edition that the committee proposes is that we preserve the meanings of showing consent to the election of the candidate that we currently use. Namely, consent is expressed by some combination of a song or acclamation, or by applause, or by standing. The typical edition gives the conference the authority to determine this detail of the rite, and we propose that we retain the decision that we made back in 2002. The action item is amendable, and approval of this text requires affirmative vote by 2/3 of the Latin Church members of the USCCB, with subsequent confirmatio of the Congregation for Divine Worship and the discipline of the sacraments. Your Eminence, I would be happy to entertain any points of clarification at this time.
Any of the brothers have items for clarification at this time for Archbishop Gregory? Seeing none, Archbishop Gregory, thank you very much. We look forward to voting.
Thank you, Your Eminence.
Okay. I'd now like to call forward Bishop Robert Barron, Committee on Evangelization and Catechesis, action item number 5. Does the body of bishops approve the revised passage on the death penalty for the U.S. Catholic Catechism for Adults, with subsequent recognitio from the Holy See, 2/3 of conference membership? Bishop Barron.
Thank you very much, Your Eminence. I just want to give a little bit of background, brothers, to this proposal. So you know that last summer, Pope Francis revised paragraph 2267 of the Universal Catechism of the Catholic Church dealing with this issue of capital punishment. The change was announced and promulgated by a letter to bishops dated August 1st, 2018, from Cardinal Ladaria, the prefect for the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith. The U.S. Catholic Catechism for Adults is a key catechetical text approved by the full body of bishops in November 2004, and its current treatment of the death penalty quotes extensively from the old paragraph number 2267, largely influenced by John Paul II's changes and the second edition of the Catechism of 1997. So the goal of the proposed revision is to keep our treatment of the death penalty in the U.S. Catholic Catechism for Adults in alignment with the revised Universal Catechism. This proposed revision quotes extensively, as you know, from Pope Francis' new paragraph 2267. Just a quick word about some of the key features here. We're emphasizing, as the Pope does, the irreducible dignity of all people, even those accused of terrible crimes, the practical non-necessity of capital punishment given developments within the civil society, and finally, the danger of the gross misapplication of this penalty. I think it's important to note that we're not debating here the change to the Universal Catechism in itself. This really is not the occasion to debate the issue of capital punishment as it's been formulated, but rather the issue is this proposal an adequate reflection of what we find in the most recent revisions? So the proposed draft provides, I think, a context and justification for the development of this teaching on the dignity of the human person, but also emphasizes the continuity of our teaching by citing John Paul II's encyclical, The Gospel of Life, as well as previous statements of our own Bishops' Conference. A quick note that the Editio Typica of the Universal Catechism has not yet been published. If we make this change, we would not, of course, issue our version until the Universal Catechism is itself approved. You have the text before you there. We've received in our committee a couple of modifications which we've accepted. Those are also listed there in front of you. And with that, of course, we're open to further suggestion and amendment. And I believe, Cardinal Donato, those will be due not tonight, but tomorrow night. Is that correct? Or has that one changed? It was initially tonight they were due for our committee.
Tonight, I think
it is tonight. So
Yep.
if the amendments could be in by 5 o'clock tonight, that would be great. And so with that, I'd be open to any further questions or clarification.
Brothers, any questions for clarification for Bishop Barron on this particular issue on the Catechism and capital punishment? Bishop Doherty.
Thank you, Your Eminence. Bishop Barron, thank you for your work on this. You might have come across an article in one of our Catholic newspapers in the last few weeks that was puzzling over the word inadmissible. My question is not, again, to change what the Holy Father is asking and teaching, but I think the article raised a good point about what exactly does that mean on a topic that a lot of our people have an above-average interest in. Thank you.
Yeah, and of course, we're moving there onto the ground of what's meant in the original revision of this. And to my mind, I'm just speaking for myself here, to my mind, the Pope maintains and our version imitates a certain, if you want, eloquent ambiguity on that point, where it doesn't use the language of intrinsic evil, for example, but it uses language like that, inadmissible, morally unacceptable, etc. So we're just trying to imitate as much as we can what's found in the way the Pope revised this teaching. But I wouldn't dare speak to what the mind of the Pope on that is, but that's just my assessment of why that language is used. We just try, for the most part, to imitate it.
Is there anyone else? Bishop Barron, seeing none, thanks for the presentation and for the points of clarification, and I think Bishop should stay here. He should stay. We follow this immediately by Committee on Evangelization and Catechesis. Bishop Barron, you are doing a report and discussion on reaching out to those who are religiously unaffiliated.
Good, thank you, Your Eminence. I appreciate the time, brothers, to update you a bit on the work of our committee. So when I became chair of this committee a year and a half ago, I turned its focus toward what I think is now clearly the second most important issue facing us. We've been discussing the first one this morning, but the second most important, I think, is this massive attrition of our own people, especially the young. It's become almost a term of art now, the nuns, the N-O-N-E-S. We tend to use now the term the unaffiliated. But to look at this issue of who are the unaffiliated, why are they leaving, and how do we get them back, I think is a top priority for our church. So what I did is I invited a number of the key national experts in this area to address our committee. First of all, Mr. Brandon Vaught, someone I've worked with closely at Word on Fire, himself a millennial, and one of the best experts in the country, I think, at the use of the social media, precisely to reach the unaffiliated. So Brandon spoke to our committee. Then Mr. Curtis Martin, the founder of Focus. I don't know any group that's more effective today in reaching out to college-age students, especially those who've wandered away from the faith. So Curtis addressed our committee. Thirdly, Dr. Christian Smith from the University of Notre Dame, to my mind, the best sociologist of this issue, the best number cruncher and analyst from a sociological perspective of this problem. So he addressed our committee. And finally, also from Notre Dame, Dr. Chris Baglow, one of the best people, I think, on the issue of religion and science. And study after study show that this problem is what's unnerving a lot of our young people, that the faith seems out of step with science. So Dr. Baglow addressed us on this matter. What I want to do just very briefly this morning, I promise you, is to share just a few of the insights from these people and what we've learned and talked about on our committee. So first of all, just some statistics. Many are probably now familiar to you. How many are leaving? The short answer is a lot. If I would break it down, 50% now of millennial Catholics, let's say Catholics 30 and younger, roughly, have left the church. So the number of the unaffiliated across the country is now about 25%, but if you look at those 30 and younger, it rises to 40%. Look at Catholics 30 and younger, it rises to 50%. Half the kids that we baptized and confirmed the last, let's say, 30 years are now ex-Catholics or unaffiliated. Fully 1 out of 6 millennials in America is now a former Catholic. Here's a stat that's always grabbed my attention. For every one person joining our church today, 6.45 are leaving. So as we welcome people in these wonderful rites of election and so on every spring, keep in mind, for every one that joins us, 6.45 are leaving. Now, when are they leaving? Short answer, when they're quite young. 79% of those who leave the church now leave before the age of 23. The median age, this always gets my attention too, the median age of those who leave is now 13. So as you're addressing kids in the early years of high school, late years of grammar school, that's when they're often making the decision to leave. Now, where are they going? Well, the short answer is becoming nuns, becoming unaffiliated. Here's the breakdown. About 25% are becoming evangelicals. About 25% roughly go to another mainstream religion, and fully 50% become nuns or unaffiliated. What are the reasons for their leaving? What are the reasons? And here's one thing, brothers, we can speculate about this, but there's now a library of literature on it. There have been so many studies and surveys done where we've asked young people, why have you left? And they've told us. I find dealing with our fellow ministers often and our brother priests that people will have a lot of opinions about it, but we don't really need our own private impressions. We have a lot of data on this question. Here's the one, especially in a recent Pew Forum study, became very clear. People are leaving because they no longer believe the church's teachings. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not talking here about moral teachings. That does come into play, especially around the issues of sexuality. But here we're talking about, I'd say, the basic narrative of Christianity and our doctrinal beliefs. They'll tell us they just don't believe the doctrines, they don't believe the story. My own editorializing, I do think this is a bitter fruit of the dumbing down of our faith. It's now been going on for a long time. The dumbing down of our faith, the way we present it catechetically, apologetically, and otherwise. But that's the main reason that young people give. Here's a second one that comes up a lot in Christian Smith's research, relativism. Now, here's a quote from Christian Smith's research that stays in my mind. Young people, he says, are simply uneasy with strong statements made regarding theology. Consequently, very few, if any, general statements can or should be made about God, faith, or morality. So that's his assessment of listening now to a whole army of young people, unaffiliated. They're just reluctant ever to make a strong or clear statement about God, faith, or morality. Hence, the disconnect with the church. Relatedly, I call it the culture of self-invention, which is pretty rampant in the work that I do in the social media, dealing with young people all the time. The assumption that it's simply the right of the individual to make up his or her own mind about what's true and what's right and what's good. I've argued that what begins with Nietzsche and then into Sartre and Foucault, they were at a high level of discourse, has now trickled down into the minds of most of our young people, that I invent myself. Sartre's existence preceding essence is now the default position, I think, in most of our young people, and hence a deep disconnect with the church that claims to speak an objective truth and morality. I mentioned the science problem already, which is in every single survey. I'd finally mention the church's sexual teaching. So again and again and again, especially as you get younger in the cohort, the church's teaching on sexuality is a major obstacle. So those are some of the reasons why the young people are becoming disaffiliated. And I'll close now just with this brief consideration of signs of hope. First of all, and Christian Smith was very clear on this when he spoke to our committee, and he's been clear in his writings, is that actually few of the nuns, the N-O-N-E-S, are fiercely anti-religious. So that the angry atheist, and I come across them a lot in my work on the internet and the social media, but in terms of absolute numbers, they're pretty small. Mostly unaffiliated are, maybe blandly indifferent to religion, or they've kind of drifted rather than stormed away from religion. And so that's a sign of hope, that we're not up against a fierce opponent at every turn. Most are ambivalent about religion rather than hostile to it. Here's a second thing, and please don't take this as a one-sided endorsement of Jordan Peterson, but I'm going to mention the Jordan Peterson phenomenon. If you don't know about Jordan Peterson, he's clearly the most popular figure in social media. He's a mild-mannered professor of psychology from Toronto who speaks at a very high level about serious things and big ideas. The first time I came across him, someone told me about him, and I went on YouTube and found him in a video. He's sitting on a metal folding chair, a little lavalier mic, poor lighting, and he has a book open on his lap, and it's Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil. And he's carrying on for over an hour in this video about Nietzsche. Then I look down at the count of views. I mean, hundreds of thousands. And then you go to his other videos, you get into the millions of views. What's he talking about now? both on the road and in social media, the Bible. He's a Jungian psychologist, so reading the Bible from kind of an archetypal psychology standpoint. But the point is, millions of especially young people are listening to not a fire and brimstone and not a whiz-bang speaker, a very mild-mannered, high-level speaker discussing our book, discussing the Bible, and young people, especially young men, by the way, responding massively to him. That, I think, is worth reflecting on and is a sign of hope. I'd also mentioned some of these wonderful Catholic campus missionary groups. So I mentioned Focus already, but also St. Paul's Outreach, others, that are getting traction with young people, with these hands-on discipleship models, the direct contact with people, the work in small groups, all of that, I think is effective, can be effective, and that's a sign of hope. Just one last thing, and something I know about pretty well, is the amount of engagement about religion in the social media. Now, most of the engagement I get in my work is from people who are angry at me or God or religion or the church. Nevertheless, there they are. Nevertheless, they're engaging these religious issues. The most remarkable in recent months, I don't know if you know about the Reddit, one of the most popular websites in the world. And Reddit has a thing called AMA, which is Ask Me Anything. So it's their version of the quadlibetal questions from the Middle Ages, just ask me anything you want. So I got on there announcing myself as a Catholic bishop who loves to talk to atheists. And within an hour and 15 minutes, I had something like 12,500 questions, comments, so on. And it turned out to be the number 3 ranking for Reddit for the whole year. I take it, brothers, as a sign of hope again. And even though a lot of that was negative and questions and challenges, nevertheless, simply coming out publicly and announcing, I'm here to talk about religion, gets an extraordinary reaction from young people, which I think is a sign of hope. Now, lastly, this is meant simply to whet your appetite for next November the 12th. So our committee is going to sponsor a lunch conference from 12:30 to 2 on November 12th at our meeting. And I'm going to bring in the very people I mentioned and some others too. I'll give a brief introduction, then we'll have an open discussion with some of these experts. And also at that meeting, I'm going to debut maybe just a 5-minute preview of a video that we've sponsored. I got a film company that I work with in Chicago many times. Very lively, very good with young people. But my purpose here is to do a video that will help us to understand this issue. Who are the unaffiliated? Why are they leaving? How do we get them back? And we'll debut that video and then make it available to everybody next November. So with that, Your Eminence, thank you for the time, and more than open to any comments or questions.
Brothers, comments or questions for Bishop Barron on his observations about the unaffiliated? Cardinal O'Malley, followed by Bishop Strickland.
Thank you very much, Bishop. I think we all agree that this is the second greatest problem that we're facing right now. One area, I think, a very practical response that all of us bishops could do is by sending more men and good men to be military chaplains, to work with young people in our armed services. That's one area where we're, I think, falling down on our responsibility.
I quite agree with that. One thing we've done at Word on Fire, whenever we come out with a video series, I always send them around to all the military bases because I sense the same thing you do, that it's a very fertile ground for evangelization. And we've gotten a very strong response, so I quite agree with that.
Bishop Strickland.
Thank you, Your Eminence, and thank you, Bishop Barron. I just wanted to underscore what you began with, that what we're talking about with the norms and all of those difficult issues is important, probably the main time span we'll spend at this meeting. But as you pointed out, I think this is the critical issue. And just in my own experience in a small diocese, I would encourage us all, and I'm sure we're all aware, but I think we need to focus that one really is connected to the other. So much you talk about the young that are leaving, but isn't that what's happened with hearts that have stopped believing in the wondrous truth of Jesus Christ? And so the salvation of souls really is what it all comes down to once again. So I just wanted to thank you and really underscore what I believe is the reality that it really is one topic of returning to the wondrous truth of Jesus Christ, helping the young and the old and everyone in between know the truth and really wade through what our culture constantly pumps out as just make up your own mind, your own opinion. So thank you very much. I really look forward to November 12th.
Amen. Thank you.
Bishop Coyne, followed by Bishop Estevez.
I'd like to reiterate exactly what was said, that it's wonderful that we're talking about this issue, and I think we need to make it front and center at all of our gatherings. In your discussion next November, and I know this is something that you're very aware of, could we talk also about not just the religious and philosophical, but the cultural and sociological issues that we face, in particular in dealing with millennials? The Catholic Leadership Institute, in its presentation to some bishops in the winter, talked about the fact, and I may have my number wrong, that by the time they turn 40, most millennials have moved at least 17 times, which means that the paradigm of a parish membership does not work with them. And that's just not parish, that's the fact that in our culture now, people are not joining communities, the famous book Bowling Alone, for example. And the last thing I'll say is this also leads to a confrontation of culture of isolation and loneliness, in which people, the vast majority of people, when you ask them, are you happy? They'll say, no, I feel lonely. Even in relationships, they'll say, I feel lonely. So that's a context too that we have to take into discussion when we're talking about evangelization, outreach, and hope.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, absolutely. And something that came up a lot at the Youth Synod last October was this paradox that in many ways we have this crisis of the young people leaving, but at the same time we have, I think through divine providence, a means to reach the unaffiliated, because as you say, Bishop, they're not coming to our institutions and programs the way they used to. We used to trust that people would come to our institutions and be evangelized. Well, they're not. So we have to go get them, and we do have the means to do that through the social media, with all of its negativity, and believe me, I know all about it. But yet I think there's a providential gift involved there. Now, the paradox is, and you put your finger on it, that can also lead to this alienation and isolation. People living their lives through screens, you know. So we face that. But I think to use it as an evangelical tool is required now, given the fact that people aren't going to come to our institutions.
Bishop Estevez, followed by Bishop Rosaza.
Bishop Barron, I am very pleased about this discussion, which relates so well to the new evangelization, which we have been working for so long. Is there any research done on those who stay, our seminarians who are their peers? Is there any effort to engage them in this issue? Because after all, they are their age and they are their culture.
No, that's a very good point. And when I was seminary rector at Mundelein, I often put a stress on that. I said, but you guys are in the front lines of this. It's your peers we're talking about. And the point you make is a very good one is, yes, we talk to those who've left. How come you've left? But to talk to those who stay. How come you've stayed? A lot of the young people I dealt with at Mundelein would say they stayed, they wanted to be part of the solution. They wanted to be part of this renewal of the church. But I think that's absolutely right, that they're a key element in reaching out to their own peers. I mentioned Brandon Vaught there, who's himself a millennial, so understands very well the pressures and the unique cultural situation of the millennials. So to draw on people like that, I think, is a key part of it.
Bishop Rosaza, followed by Archbishop Sample.
Thanks a lot, Bishop Barron. You certainly are a gift to the church. And the way you put your talents at the service of the Lord, magnificent. Does this cut across ethnic and, well, for instance, Hispanics? Would you consider the leaving of the, within the nuns, Hispanic people?
Yeah, there's been a lot of research, and Josman Ospina will be speaking at our November gathering, and he's part of the video as well to address precisely that side of it. I'll say one very quick thing. What's happening is as Hispanics become enculturated here and as the generations move on, the number of the nuns increases dramatically. So Hispanics will arrive here often full of the faith and full of fervor, but it does quickly fall off as they become Americanized. So the power of the secular culture is producing nuns among the Hispanics increasingly. That's just a quick answer, but there's a lot more to be said about that.
And also, under number 4, online engagement, religion, you used a word like Reddick or something, some word like that, just before AMA. Is this?
Oh, Reddit. It's just a website of kind of social interaction, and people can have these internet-based conversations, etc.
So Reddick?
R-E-D-D-I-T.
Okay.
I'm not sure what that stands for. R-E-D-D-I-T. Reddit, yeah.
Archbishop Sampo, followed by Bishop Duca.
I want to really thank you, Bishop Barron, for you and your committee's focus on this, because I really do think that, obviously, the crisis that we're trying to deal with now at this meeting is sort of a front burner issue just because of how that has taken such prominence in our country and in the media and among our people. But I think really this is the pastoral challenge and mission of the church. This is really where our focus and energy needs to be.
Yeah.
You know, I come from the Northwest, the Archdiocese of Portland, and the Northwest is somewhat notorious for being sort of the epicenter of the nuns. I'm told that over 50% of the people in my archdiocese identify as nuns. And when I was first installed, I was a little taken, or as I announced at my press conference, was taken a little bit off guard by a question from one of the reporters who said, you know, this is known to be a very unchurched part of the country where most people identify as spiritual but not religious. How are you going to relate to that? And I sort of a knee-jerk appropriate response was, well, to me that's fertile ground for the new evangelization. And it has really proven to be true. Each year, I don't know how this statistic plays out in other parts of the country, but I know each year through our rites of election, we have 6 in the archdiocese because of the geography, but well over half of those people who are going through the process each year, at least through the rites of election, are unbaptized, are true catechumens. They have never been churched at all, and I think that's really very symbolic of where we're at, certainly in our part of the country. You know, in my confirmation homily this year, I presume I do the same thing everyone else does and give the same homily everywhere. But I'm sure some of your brothers do one separately. But I hit this head on because I just spoke very frankly with the young people and said that it's a great pastoral concern of mine that really, statistically, I know that many of you will leave the church maybe a few years after your confirmation. And why is this happening? And really the homily boiled down to what I think we need to get back to, and it's the basic proclamation of the good news and the kerygma. And, you know, I shared with them, but basically I said, why am I a Catholic? You know, apart from being an archbishop, why am I a Catholic? And it's because what I believe about Jesus Christ and the salvation that he has won for us through his passion, death, and resurrection, that he established a church to carry on that saving mission in the world, that it's God's will that I belong to that church in order to attain eternal life and salvation, and that church is the Catholic Church. And it was amazing the response I got, not so much from the students, but from parents, godparents, grandparents, that it was a real kind of awakening moment for them. So I point that out only to say that I think, I think you were right that there's been kind of a dumbing down, perhaps, of our proclamation of the faith, and we need to get back to really proclaiming what we're called to proclaim. As St. Paul said, you know, when he tried to get fancy, you know, with the Greeks and talk about the altar to the unknown God, he didn't get very far, did he? But when he proclaimed Jesus Christ crucified And that's what I proclaim. I think we need to be bold because we have what so many of these people are looking for. So I really hope that this gains a lot of traction and goes where it needs to go. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that. I think you're quite right about the proclamation of the Lord. I'd say one quick thing, C.S. Lewis's famous line about before the evangelist comes, there should be an apologist that comes first to clear up questions that are just blocking access to the good news. I think Billy Graham was coming to England at that time, and Lewis made that remark. And there's a lot to that for a lot of the young people today, even to talk about God, God is this strange fantasy from a pre-scientific imagination. Jesus is an old mythic figure like Zeus or something, So, I mean, to clear the ground by answering some of those concerns. I'll say another quick thing about Jordan Peterson. When he and I were together on a podcast show, and he said, how come you think people wanted the two of us to get together? And I said, I think because you're kind of a way station between the new atheists and the fullness of truth. And what I meant, I was a little tongue-in-cheek, but what I meant was he was, I think, helping a lot of young people to get out of this dismal space that the new atheists invited a lot of them into. And trust me, they listened to Dawkins and Hitchens and Sam Harris. They still do. In this dismal, bleak spiritual space. And they know their restless heart wants more. Peterson, I think, by kind of opening things up a bit, is a way station. So there's different strategies we can use to be a propedeutic to the proclamation of the gospel. But you're quite right.
Bishop Duca, followed by Bishop Ricken. We have a few others. We'll try to get them in before 12:30, which is the obligatory time when your stomachs begin to fill in. So we'll do the bishop.
All I was going to suggest is that this, as we're doing this talk, and you're talking about these whole issues, I feel like those disciples on the road to Emmaus, did our hearts not burn? I mean, there's a certain kind of waking up to this need. The conference that you're talking about, or that workshop at lunch, which had 3 prominent speakers, I'd like just to suggest that it might become part of the actual conference meeting, and that we also, although I know we don't like cameras, but if we produced it in a way, then that could be a resource for many people to listen in as a kind of workshop of the church. And so with the bishops here, inviting our evangelization committees and lay people from throughout the world, really advertise that particular part to hear this message and hear this insight. I think it would be something that might be quite refreshing, and we may have to do away with some of the more typical things we might do, but I think it would be a great way to give a fuller presentation with more interaction of the bishops around this really needful topic. So thank you.
It's okay by me, but that's beyond my pay grade, as they say.
I know.
Bishop Ricken, followed by Bishop Pfeiffer.
Yeah, Bishop Barron, thank you very much for your leadership with the Evangelization and Catechesis Committee and now bringing this to the whole body. It is so important, and your commitment as well to, as you say, crack the code on the nuns or the unaffiliated is incredibly important. Now we not just have the millennial generation, but their children, the Zs.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we have great opportunities, and I think we should see it in that way. The mission fields are incredible. Parents of Catholic school children, parents of religious education, the people in our pews already. We have an opportunity to be able to help them to become missionary disciples through understanding of what the kerygma is, through some of that apologetic material you mentioned. And I think we really need to commit ourselves to be all about that vision and mission. So thank you. I think this discussion that hopefully we can have on a broad basis in November will really help us to move into this need, which is critical, and it's what we're all about, because evangelization is the mission of the church. In fact, the church herself is that mission. Thank you.
I'll just say one quick thing. Thank you, Bishop, for that. An observation Christian Smith made. I think I asked him in the committee, so what's the one thing you would say to Catholic, parents if they want to prevent their child from becoming a nun? And his answer was, talk about religion with them. The fact that young people don't have religious conversations. So this outside the classroom, but just around the dinner table, that people don't talk about religion is a major contributing factor. So that's how you evangelize too. But let's talk about God and about the church and about the sacraments.
Bishop Pfeiffer, followed by Bishop Van Johnson.
Bishop Barron, I offer a few reflections on what you said. From my experience and what I've read, so many of the young people you talked about, the nuns, have not experienced the love of God, the love of Jesus Christ. They don't know about it, or they don't believe God loves them. They have lost a sense of the meaning of life and the joy of living life that comes from living with the Holy Spirit. We haven't put them in contact with that Spirit that they have. They were baptized. We need to really stir up that fire. That's one of your ministries.
Yeah.
And when this is lacking, it leads to a terrible other crisis among youth. Right now, the number one, or at least number two cause of death among young people is suicide. High amounts, rising all the time. I've had to deal with some of these in my ministry. Secondly, we need theological reflection, but we really need, especially for those who are leaving and going to other churches, is a true sense of welcome and love in our community that they don't find. And I think to help them find that, we need to work with that other 50% that are there and use them as the evangelizers. We don't stress that enough. We talk about what we can do, yes, but we need to incorporate much more those other good youth that we have and ask them to help us. They have many solutions, and very often, young people won't listen to me, but they will listen to their peers. Thank you.
Yeah, amen to all that. On purpose, I didn't lay out the 9 things I'm going to lay out in November. I'm going to offer 9 paths, I think, that will help re-engage the nuns. One of them is turning every parish into a mission society. So that whole idea of, getting out of the sacristy, as Pope Francis puts it, that is the parish itself an engine of evangelization. But stay tuned for November for more, but I agree with you about the Holy Spirit especially.
Bishop Van Johnson, followed by Bishop Nestow.
I just want to, first of all, echo a lot of the affirmation that's already been expressed, but I think one of the most striking of the statistics that you listed was the median age of those who leave is 13.
Yeah.
I think that's very shocking, and one of the things that I would encourage in this process is not only how we respond to those who have become nuns, but looking at how to prevent and stem the tide. And I think a lot of it has to go with helping families realize their key role in forming disciples, because that it really is really in middle school and even earlier where young people are making decisions. And so I think it has implications not only for our family life, but even what we're doing in our Catholic schools. And the other thing, these are kids that are really part of that generation that I think was not really formed that well. And so I think sort of addressing those parents and our schools, family life, and even one of the things that's most striking today, I think, too, is the steep drop-off in worship. I mean, when you stop worshiping a God, that also has implications as well. Intuitively, children realize, well, this isn't really important. I think if you look at just the small percentage of people that worship God on Sunday, and so I think we have to pay attention also to emphasizing the basic importance of worshiping the living God. So all of those things, I think, have implications in the long run, not only to reaching those who have left, but stopping the attrition. It has implications for a lot of other things that I hope your committee will pay attention to as well.
Yeah, no, you're right. I'll just say a very quick thing about the research done by Jean Twenge, who's a San Diego-based sociologist. And her book called iGen, so, iPad, iPod, the iGen are the really young kids now that, let's say, 15 through, 25. And her argument there is statistics are showing They are both decreasingly spiritual and decreasingly religious. The point being, we used to say, well, they're not, very religious, but they're still kind of spiritual. And she's saying, now what's happened is, it's the cut flower theory. That for a while, you cut the flowers, you put them in a vase, they're okay for a time, the spiritual values. But take them out of their religious foundation in prayer, liturgy, worship, parish life, etc., those flowers will fade. Her argument is that's happening. So religion and spirituality are not distant cousins, they're intimately linked.
Bishop Nestout, followed by Bishop Mark O'Connell.
Just want to add a word of gratitude and encouragement regarding this effort as well. As was mentioned earlier, that it is, I think, very much key to all that we should be concentrating on. From a diocese myself, where there is 68 colleges or universities and a large military presence as well. So it's really a very key aspect of the local church in Richmond and young people and reaching them. I think I want to emphasize maybe that one of the areas to reflect on is the power of our own sacramental theology in a world of disembodied kind of social media, the importance of personal encounter and how, as you mentioned, the parishes can be a key aspect of this in terms of response. Every year in the Diocese of Richmond, there is the youth conference and college summit where there's several thousand young people who are gathered for that. And I saw there the power of Eucharistic adoration in terms of helping transform that situation and young people, their attractiveness towards that and the power of that. So.
I'm always impressed by that. With our confirmation kids, over and over again I hear it's Eucharistic adoration draws them in. I think because they're so distracted by their screens and iPhones and everything. So quite right. I think the sacramentals and the sacraments are key to it.
Bishop Mark O'Connell, followed by Archbishop Naumann, and I think that's it. Okay.
Quick comment on language.
Yeah.
I think perhaps it's time to stop the emphasis on millennials. Not that that's not important, but 19-year-olds are not millennials.
Yeah.
So I think that young people is a better way to go forward.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, so the Gene Twenge research I mentioned is talking about kids younger than millennials, for sure. So yeah, the thing keeps changing as we go along.
Archbishop Naumann.
Yes, thanks, Bishop Barron. You know, one thing that I've found effective is the literature of those that have been atheists that are now Catholic. Mm-hmm. And I think people like Jennifer Fulweiler, Sally Reed, the Sohrab Amari, sharing their testimonies because they've been in the wasteland of atheism. Mm-hmm. And sharing what draws them back, I think, can be powerful, and listening to what it was that brought them from atheism to Catholicism is powerful.
Yeah, quite right. Leah Libresco, too. Do you know her work? She was a Yale student, atheist, and then with the support of a wonderful kind of debating society, she began thinking her way toward Catholicism, and now is an ardent evangelist for the faith.
Bishop Barron, we want to thank you. You've obviously roused some real intense, igniting fire in people, points of view. Thank you. We look forward to November.
Terrific.
And listen, would you include in that group the board? I think the board account for some of these people who have grown away from the church. They're just bored with everything.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks, Bishop.
God bless you. Thanks.
I would now ask, Monsignor has a couple of points and announcements for us, and then we'll have the grace for lunch.
Thank you, Your Eminence. Your Eminences, Your Excellencies, lunch will be served in the Harborside D and E room located on the 4th floor. We will reconvene at 2 p.m. in this room for the start of the afternoon session, which will treat the Bishop's Working Group on Immigration Issues and the Bishop's Working Group on Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship. Thank you, Your Eminence.
Okay. Archbishop. Sure.
In the name of the Father, and Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
The angel of the Lord declared unto Mary,
she conceived of the Holy Spirit.
And Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Behold the handmaid of the Lord.
Be it done unto me according to thy word.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
And the Word was made flesh.
And dwelt among us.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death.
Pray for us, O Holy Mother of God.
That we may be made worthy of the promises of Christ.
Put forth, we beseech
Beseech thee, O Lord, thy grace into our hearts, that we to whom the incarnation of Christ thy Son was made known by the message of an angel, may by his passion and cross be brought to the glory of his resurrection, through the same Christ our Lord. Amen.
Bless us, O Lord.
And these thy gifts, which we are about to receive from thy bounty through Christ our Lord. Amen.
And by Father, and Son, and Holy Spirit.
Let me go to the bathroom first.
All right.
Step.